A polar bear wandered alone across the Arctic glaciers. Suddenly he heard a distant sound, a cry of pain. Following the sound, he found an eagle trapped in a snare. As he approached to free it, he was shocked by something unexpected. Before hearing this thrilling story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. In the vast white expanse of the Arctic, where silence was broken only by the soft whistle of the wind, a majestic polar bear named Nanook roamed alone. His white fur blended with the landscape as he trudged heavily through the snow, leaving deep footprints that would soon be erased by the next blizzard. It was a day like any other, until a sharp sound cut through the icy air. Nanook lifted his head, his ears twitching toward the distressing noise. His instincts guided him across the rugged terrain, past ice formations that reflected the sunlight like giant crystals. As he drew closer, the sound became clearer. It was a cry for help, unlike anything he had ever heard before. Rounding a large ice formation, his eyes found the source of the sound. A majestic golden eagle was caught in a metal net, its wings tangled in the cruel mesh. The bird, normally a symbol of power and freedom, now struggled helplessly, its golden feathers stained by the churned snow in its fight for freedom. Nanook's first instinct was to retreat. After all, bears and eagles rarely met on friendly terms, but something in the bird's gaze held him there. Its amber eyes conveyed deep intelligence, and in that moment, a silent plea for help. Cautiously, the bear approached. "Please," the eagle spoke, its voice surprisingly soft for such an imposing creature. "I can't free myself alone." Nanook hesitated only for a moment before moving closer. With surprising gentleness for an animal of his size, he began working on the net's cords with his claws. "My name is Nanook," he said as he worked. "What's yours?" "I'm Akna," replied the eagle, staying as still as possible to make the bear's task easier. "I was flying over this region when I was caught in this trap. I've never seen anything like it here before." As they talked, Nanook continued his meticulous work of freeing the eagle. With each snapped cord, Akna grew closer to freedom. However, when she was finally free, it was clear she was too injured to fly. One of her wings had been hurt during her struggle against the net. "I can't leave her here," Nanook decided, glancing at the darkening sky. "I know a safe place not far from here. Can I take you there?" Akna agreed, realizing she would need help to survive until she recovered. Carefully, Nanook helped her onto his back, and together they began a journey across the icy landscape. Along the way, they shared stories of their solitary lives in the Arctic. The cave Nanook chose as a refuge was sheltered from the biting winds and offered a commanding view of the frozen plain below. Gently, he helped Akna settle into a sheltered corner, using his own body as additional protection against the cold. "Why are you helping me?" Akna asked after settling in. "Polar bears aren't known for their compassion toward other species." Nanook was silent for a moment, reflecting. "Maybe it's because I understand what it's like to be alone," he finally replied. "In this increasingly hostile world, sometimes we need to rely on each other to survive." That night marked the beginning of an unlikely friendship. As the aurora borealis danced in the dark sky outside, bear and eagle talked about the changes they had observed in their habitat. The traps were just one sign of the growing human presence in the region. "Something is changing in the Arctic," Akna observed, gazing at the horizon through the cave entrance. "More and more, I see strange machines and structures being built, where there was once only ice and snow." Nanook nodded, concerned. "Humans are encroaching further into our territory. Many of my friends have had to migrate to more distant regions in search of food and safety." Their conversation was interrupted by a distant but familiar sound, the unmistakable noise of approaching engines. Nanook and Akna exchanged worried glances, knowing that night would be just the beginning of a journey far greater than either of them could imagine. The sound of the engines grew louder, echoing off the ice walls. Nanook and Akna remained in absolute silence inside the cave, watching through the entrance as lights cut through the night sky. Two helicopters hovered over the area in a systematic search pattern, their beams sweeping the icy surface. "They're the ones who set the trap," Akna whispered, her feathers bristling at the recent memory. "They have special equipment to locate rare animals. We need to move." Nanook knew she was right, but he also realized Akna wasn't yet fit to fly. With quick decision, He positioned himself at the cave entrance, his massive body partially blocking the view inside. The helicopters came dangerously close, and the polar bear felt his heart race as one of the light beams passed near the entrance of their refuge. "Stay behind me," he murmured to Akna. "If they find us, you head deeper into the cave. There's a passage that leads to a system of ice tunnels." The eagle protested, "I won't let you face this alone." "You saved me. Now we're allies." Before they could argue further, one of the helicopters hovered dangerously close to the cave. Human voices could be heard over the roar of the blades, and strange equipment was pointed in their direction. Nanook felt every muscle in his body tense, preparing for what was to come. It was then that Akna did something unexpected. Even with her injured wing, she launched herself out of the cave in a short, erratic flight, letting out a sharp cry that echoed across the icy expanse. The surprising maneuver caught the helicopter's attention, and they immediately directed their spotlights toward her. Seizing the distraction, Nanook emerged from the cave with a deafening roar. His white fur gleamed under the artificial lights as he rose on his hind legs, reaching an impressive height. The pilots, caught off guard by the polar bear's presence, momentarily lost control of their aircraft. One of the helicopters descended rapidly, and its occupants began unloading equipment. Nanook realized they were cages and nets, confirming his suspicions about the invaders' intentions. With tremendous strength, he charged at the stacked equipment, hurling it away and destroying several pieces. Akna, though injured, continued her aerial performance, flying in erratic circles that confused the captors. Her strategy worked perfectly. While the humans tried to track her movements, Nanook had the freedom to sabotage their plans. "We need to make them give up for good," Akna called between low flights. "If they return with reinforcements, we'll be at a disadvantage." Nanook understood. With a calculated move, he attacked the generator powering the tracking equipment, plunging the area into partial darkness. The ensuing chaos was intense. Humans running in panic, equipment abandoned, and the helicopters trying to maneuver blindly in the sudden darkness. Amid the confusion, Akna managed to land beside Nanook, and together they watched the invaders retreat hastily. The helicopters lifted off toward the horizon, leaving behind only wrecked equipment and marks in the snow. "That was impressive," said Nanook, admiring his new friend's courage. "Even injured, you didn't hesitate to fight." Akna tilted her head, a gesture of respect. "I've learned that sometimes we need to ignore our limitations to protect those who care about us. You saved me first, remember." Returning to the cave, both knew that confrontation was just the beginning. The humans would return, likely with more equipment and people. As Nanook helped Akna settle back in, they began planning how to protect not just themselves, but the entire Arctic territory they called home. "We need to warn the other animals," Akna said thoughtfully. "When I can fly again, I can be the eyes in the sky, watching for suspicious movements and alerting everyone." Nanook agreed, realizing their unlikely friendship could be key to the survival of many. The night deepened, and as the wind howled outside, Bear and Eagle rested side by side, each lost in thoughts about the uncertain future ahead. The following days brought a peculiar routine for the unlikely duo. Nanook spent his mornings hunting, always returning with fresh fish to share with Akna. The Eagle, in turn, exercised her injured wing with growing determination, performing short flights within the cave under the polar bear's watchful eye. "You're progressing quickly," Nanook observed one afternoon, watching Akna glide from one ledge to another. "Soon you'll be flying like before." The Eagle landed gently beside her friend, her golden feathers reflecting the light from the cave entrance. "Thanks to your care, I never imagined a polar bear could be so gentle." During their conversations, they shared stories of their lives and observations about the changes in their habitat. Akna spoke of the wonders seen from above, the whale migrations and auroras that seemed even more magnificent when viewed during flight. Nanook, in turn, spoke of the ancient wisdom of the ice, the secrets hidden in the depths of the Arctic Ocean, and the stories passed down through generations of polar bears. "My grandmother used to say the Arctic is like a living being," Nanook explained one night as they watched the stars. "Every crack in the ice, every shift in the wind tells a story. But now, with all these machines and human constructions, it's as if our home is losing its voice." Akna ruffled her feathers, thoughtful. From above, I can see how fast the changes are happening. Where there was once eternal ice, metal structures now appear. Seal pups are finding it harder to locate safe birthing spots. One day, as Nanook returned from his morning hunt, he found Akna practicing longer flights outside the cave. His heart swelled with joy at seeing his friend reclaim her freedom, but he also felt a pang of apprehension. He knew she would soon leave. "Nanook," Akna called, landing gracefully beside him, "I need to show you something. Can you follow me to that peak?" Together they made the journey to a high point that offered a panoramic view of the region. Akna, with her keen eyesight, pointed in different directions, showing Nanook signs of human expansion he hadn't noticed before. Small research bases, drilling markers, and new equipment camouflaged in the landscape. "We need to create a protection network," Akna declared. "When I fully recover, I can fly between different animal communities, establishing an alert system. You'd be our guardian on the ground." The idea was bold but made sense. In the following days, they developed a detailed plan. Akna mentally mapped escape routes and safe points, while Nanook shared his knowledge of caves and underground tunnels that could serve as refuges. One particularly clear morning, Akna completed her first long-distance flight since the accident. Nanook watched with pride and concern as his friend soared higher and higher, her wings now fully healed, cutting through the air with grace. "I promise to return if anything happens," Akna assured him upon landing. "Our friendship has created a bond that even the greatest distances can't break." Nanook nodded, understanding this wasn't a final goodbye, but the start of a new phase in their partnership. "The Arctic is our home," he replied, "and now we have each other to protect it." That night, their last together for now, Bear and Eagle remained side by side, watching the aurora dance in the sky. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken promises and a mutual understanding that transcended words. "You know, Nanook," Akna said softly, "before I met you I thought I was destined for a solitary life. Now I understand that sometimes we need to lose ourselves to find true friends." The polar bear smiled, his heart warmed despite the intense cold, and sometimes we need to help someone to discover our true strength. The aurora continued its dance in the sky, a silent witness to a friendship that defied nature's laws and promised to change the Arctic's destiny forever. Months passed after Akna's departure, and Nanook maintained his vigil over the Arctic territory. The plan they had developed worked well. The Eagle made regular reconnaissance flights, alerting different animal communities about suspicious human activities, while the polar bear coordinated escape routes and safe shelters on the ground. During this time, Nanook noticed troubling changes in his environment. The ice began melting earlier in the season, and the sounds of machinery became more frequent. One morning, while patrolling his territory, he found something that chilled his blood. A new series of mechanical traps, far more sophisticated than the net that had ensnared Akna. "We need to be more cautious," he warned a group of Arctic foxes he encountered. "Humans are using technology we can't fully understand." The foxes spread the word, and soon an informal communication network was established among the region's animals. Seals warned of suspicious movements at sea, while small tundra rodents served as sentinels, alerting others to strange ground vibrations that might indicate approaching vehicles. One particularly dark night, as Nanook conducted his usual patrol, his right paw was suddenly caught in one of the mechanical traps. The pain was instant and intense, but he managed to suppress a roar that might attract unwanted attention. With all his strength, he tried to free himself, but the mechanism was unlike anything he had encountered. "Stay calm," he told himself, remembering his grandmother's teachings about dangerous situations. He tried to analyze the mechanism around him, but the darkness made it difficult to see. Each movement caused more pain, and he realized he was losing blood. In that desperate moment, he remembered Akna's promise. Summoning his last strength, he let out a deep, prolonged roar that echoed across the icy expanse. It was a sound that carried not just pain, but also hope that his friend might hear him. The hours that followed were a test of endurance. Nanook alternated between moments of lucidity and confusion as the temperature continued to drop. Small animals approached cautiously, offering what they could. A lemming brought moss to help stem the bleeding, while an Arctic fox stood guard, alerting to any suspicious approach. It was during the twilight of the next day that a familiar sound cut through the air, the powerful beating of wings. Akna had returned, but she wasn't alone. With her came other eagles, and, more surprisingly, a small group of humans wearing uniforms with environmental protection symbols. "Hold on, my friend," Akna called, landing near him. "I found allies who can help. They're different from the other humans. They protect animals like us." The environmentalists worked carefully and efficiently to free Nanook from the trap. A veterinarian among them treated his wounds on the spot, applying medication to ease the pain and prevent infection. Throughout the process, Akna stayed by her friend's side, her feathers occasionally brushing his fur in a comforting gesture. "How did you find them?" Nanook asked later when they were safe in his cave. "After we parted, I began observing different groups of humans," Akna explained. "I learned to distinguish between those who destroy and those who protect. These people have dedicated their lives to combating illegal hunting and the destruction of the Arctic." Nanook reflected on how the world was changing. "Perhaps," he said thoughtfully, "just as we learn to trust each other despite our differences, we can find more unlikely allies." As he recovered, Nanook and Akna strengthened their bonds with the environmentalists. The eagle served as a bridge between the two worlds, helping the humans identify critical areas that needed protection, while Nanook, even injured, continued coordinating the animal protection network they had established. "Our friendship has changed more than just our lives," Akna observed one night, watching over her injured friend's sleep. "It's changing how different species relate in this place." The Arctic wind howled outside, but inside the cave, hope warmed both their hearts. The journey was far from over, but now they had more allies in their mission to protect their icy home. As the weeks passed, Nanook gradually recovered from his injuries. The partnership with the environmentalists brought a new dimension to the fight for Arctic preservation. Akna continued to be the vital link between the animals and the humans, translating the needs and concerns of both sides. One morning, as Nanook tested his recovered paw on a short walk, Akna returned from one of her reconnaissance flights with alarming news. "Nanook, I saw something worrying," she said, landing urgently. "A large ship is approaching the coast. It's bigger than anything I've seen here before." The polar bear frowned, his concern evident. "That's unusual for this time of year. What else did you notice?" Akna described the ship in detail. It was a massive vessel equipped with what appeared to be drilling instruments and large tanks. "I think they're planning some kind of large-scale extraction operation," she concluded. Nanook knew they needed to act quickly. "We need to alert our human allies. This threat is too big to face alone." Together they headed to the small camp the environmentalists had established not far away. There they found Dr. Elena, a scientist who had become particularly close to them. "Akna, Nanook!" Elena exclaimed upon seeing them approach. Though she couldn't directly understand the animals' language, she had learned to interpret their signals and behaviors. "You seem agitated. What's happened?" Through a series of gestures and sounds, Akna managed to convey the urgency of the situation. Elena quickly grabbed her binoculars and a radio, contacting other team members. "This is serious," she said, after visually confirming the ship's presence. "It looks like an unauthorized oil exploration operation. We need to mobilize our teams and contact the authorities immediately." In the days that followed, the environmentalists' camp transformed into a command center. Teams from different environmental protection organizations arrived to support, bringing advanced monitoring equipment and maritime law experts. Nanook and Akna found themselves at the center of a coordinated effort to protect their home. The Eagle conducted constant flights, providing updates on the ship's movements and other smaller vessels that began arriving. Nanook, in turn, led groups of local animals in non-violent sabotage missions, such as removing markers left by the exploration teams. One night, as a strategy meeting took place at the camp, Akna abruptly landed in the middle of the group. Her feathers ruffled. "Something's wrong," translated Elena, interpreting the eagle's behavior. "What did you see, Akna?" Through a series of gestures and calls, Akna managed to convey that the ship had begun drilling operations much earlier than expected. The group sprang into action, with Elena making urgent calls while other team members prepared boats for an approach. "We need concrete evidence to force an intervention from the authorities," Elena explained to Nanook and Akna. but it's too dangerous to approach with boats. They could claim we're trespassing on private property." It was then that Nanook had an idea. He turned to Akna, his eyes gleaming with determination. The eagle understood immediately and nodded in agreement. "I think our friends have a plan," said Elena, watching the interaction between the two. "What are you thinking?" The plan was bold. Akna would carry a small camera attached to her, flying over the ship at a height that wouldn't raise suspicion. Nanook, in turn, would swim to a safe distance, ready to retrieve the camera if anything went wrong. The operation was tense. Everyone at the camp watched with bated breath as Akna performed calculated flights over the ship, capturing crucial images of the illegal activities. Nanook remained in the icy water, his eyes fixed on the sky, ready to act if needed. When Akna finally returned with the evidence, there was an explosion of joy at the camp. The images were clear and damning, showing blatant violations of international environmental laws. "You did it!" exclaimed Elena, gently hugging Akna and stroking Nanook's fur. "With this, we can force immediate action from the authorities." That night, as the teams worked frantically to process the evidence and file formal complaints, Nanook and Akna rested side by side, watching the distant lights of the ship. "I never imagined our friendship would lead us to this," said Nanook, his voice filled with admiration and gratitude. Akna tilted her head, gently brushing her feathers against her friend's fur. "It's more than friendship now, Nanook. It's a shared mission, a responsibility to the entire Arctic." As the aurora borealis began to dance in the sky above them, both knew this battle was just the beginning. But with their unlikely partnership and their new human allies, they felt ready to face any challenges the future might bring. The days following Akna and Nanook's operation were filled with frenetic activity. The evidence collected by the Eagle triggered a chain reaction no one could have predicted. Environmental organizations worldwide mobilized, the international media turned its eyes to the Arctic, and authorities were finally forced to act. At the environmentalists' camp, Eleanor and her team worked tirelessly, coordinating with lawyers, scientists, and government officials. Nanook and Akna remained alert, continuing their reconnaissance and protection missions for the local wildlife. One morning, Akna returned from one of her flights with alarming news. "Nanook," she called, landing urgently. "The ship is moving. It looks like they're trying to flee before the authorities arrive." The polar bear immediately stood up, his posture reflecting the gravity of the situation. "We need to warn Elena and the others. We can't let them escape." Together, they ran to the camp, where they found Elena already on alert, speaking rapidly on the phone. Seeing the two animals, she covered the microphone and addressed them. "We already know. They're trying to evade the law, but we won't let that happen. An inspection team is on its way, but they might not arrive in time." Nanook and Akna exchanged determined glances. They knew they needed to act, even if it meant putting themselves in danger once more. "We have a plan," said Elena, correctly interpreting the animal's body language. "But it's risky and we'll need your help." The plan was daring. While the authorities approached by air and sea, Elena's team would use smaller boats to create a barrier. Nanook would lead a group of seals and walruses to disrupt the ship's navigation, creating waves and confusion. Akna, in turn, would coordinate a group of seabirds for an aerial demonstration to distract the crew. As the midnight sun bathed the Arctic Ocean in golden and pink hues, the operation began. Nanook dove into the icy waters, followed by dozens of his marine allies. Together they swam in complex formations, creating currents and waves that challenged the navigation of the large ship. In the sky, Akna led an impressive spectacle. Hundreds of birds, from small gulls to majestic albatrosses, flew in intricate formations, their shadows dancing across the ship's deck and confusing its navigation instruments. The ship's crew, caught off guard by this coordinated attack from nature, panicked. Attempts to use water cannons and sonic devices to scare off the animals proved futile against the united determination of the Arctic wildlife. Eleanor and her team, in their smaller boats, took advantage of the confusion to approach and document everything. Cameras captured every moment of the animals' heroic resistance, broadcasting live to the world. At the height of the chaos, when it seemed the ship might force its way through, a deafening roar cut through the air. Everyone, humans and animals alike, paused for a moment, turning toward the source of the sound. There, atop a massive iceberg slowly approaching, stood Nanook. The polar bear, majestic and imposing, faced the ship like an ancestral guardian of the Arctic. Beside him, Akna landed gracefully, her golden feathers reflecting the midnight sun's light. The image was breathtaking, a living symbol of nature's resistance against unchecked exploitation. Cameras around the world captured the moment, which would become iconic in the years to come. It was then that the sound of helicopters broke the silence. The authorities had finally arrived. Confronted with irrefutable evidence of their illegal activities and surrounded on all sides, the ship's crew had no choice but to surrender. As the officers boarded the ship and Elena coordinated the final documentation, Nanook and Akna watched the scene from atop the iceberg. Their shared gaze was one of exhaustion, relief, and above all, hope. "We did it, my friend," Akna said softly. "We showed the world the power of unity among all creatures." Nanook nodded, his heart filled with pride and gratitude. "This is just the beginning," he replied. "We have much work ahead to protect our home." As the sun began its slow descent on the Arctic horizon, painting the sky in vibrant hues, Nanook and Akna remained side by side. Their unlikely friendship had not only saved their habitat, but also inspired a new era of cooperation between humans and animals in protecting the fragile Arctic ecosystem. The cold wind blew softly, carrying the promise of a new dawn for the Arctic and all its inhabitants. The months following the epic confrontation at sea brought significant changes to the region. The story of Nanook and Akna, along with the striking images of their resistance against illegal exploitation, spread worldwide. What began as an unlikely friendship between a polar bear and an eagle became a global symbol of environmental preservation and interspecies cooperation. International authorities, pressured by public opinion, implemented stricter protection measures for the Arctic. New conservation areas were established, and enforcement against illegal activities was intensified. Elena and her team of environmentalists saw their work gain unprecedented recognition and support. Meanwhile, Nanook and Akna continued their mission to protect their home. Their partnership evolved into a sophisticated communication network among Arctic animals. Akna coordinated the Sky Watchers, a group of birds that constantly monitored the region for threats. Nanook led the Ice Guardians, an alliance of polar bears, seals, and other marine mammals that patrolled the waters and coasts. One day, as Nanook conducted his usual patrol, he noticed something unusual. A small group of humans approaching carefully, guided by Elena. Among them were cameras and equipment he didn't recognize. Akna, flying overhead, descended to join her friend. "They're filmmakers," she explained. "Elena told me they want to make a documentary about our story and the fight to preserve the Arctic." Nanook observed the humans with a mix of caution and curiosity. "Our story? But how can they tell something they don't fully understand?" Elena approached slowly, respecting the animal's space. She crouched, meeting Nanook's eyes. "I know it's hard to trust," she said softly, as if understanding the bear's concerns. "But these are allies. They want to show the world the importance of what you've done and continue to do." Over the following weeks, Nanook and Akna found themselves at the center of a unique film production. Cameras followed them from a distance, capturing moments of their daily lives, their interactions with other animals, and the raw beauty of the Arctic environment. The process wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, especially when the filming seemed to interfere with the local wildlife. But gradually, a mutual understanding developed. The filmmakers learned to respect the animals' boundaries, and Nanook and Akna began to understand the power their images could have to educate and inspire people worldwide. One particularly emotional scene was filmed during a spectacular aurora borealis. Nanook and Akna stood side by side atop an ice hill, watching the dancing sky. The camera captured not only the natural beauty of the phenomenon, but also the deep connection between the two unlikely friends. As the project progressed, Nanook and Akna realized they weren't just telling their own story, but representing the voices of all beings who called the Arctic home. Each scene, each filmed interaction, carried a powerful message about the interconnectedness of all life. Near the end of filming, an unexpected and touching moment occurred. A polar bear cub, orphaned due to melting ice that separated it from its mother, wandered alone across the tundra. Nanook, spotting it, didn't hesitate to approach. Under the watchful eyes of the cameras, he gently guided the cub, offering protection and teaching it to survive. Akna, watching from above, felt her heart swell with emotion. She landed nearby, and together adult polar bear, cub and eagle formed an image that perfectly captured the essence of their mission: to protect, nurture, and preserve life in the Arctic for future generations. When filming finally ended, Eleanor gathered everyone, crew and animals, for a final conversation. "What you allowed us to capture here," she said, looking directly at Nanook and Akna, "goes far beyond a simple documentary. Hey, it's a testament to the power of cooperation, the resilience of nature, and hope for the future." That night, as the midnight sun bathed the horizon in golden and pink hues, Nanook and Akna met at their favorite spot, watching the vast territory they had sworn to protect. "Think of how many lives we'll touch with our story," said Akna, her feathers ruffling softly in the breeze. Nanook nodded, his eyes reflecting the sunset's light. "And how many more we still have to protect," he replied. Together they watched the Arctic stretch before them, knowing their journey was far from over. The future would bring new challenges, but also new hopes. And they would be there, unlikely guardians of a world of ice and wonder, ready to face whatever came side by side. Years passed since the documentary's filming, and the story of Nanook and Akna became a living legend. The film, titled Guardians of the Arctic, was a global success, touching hearts and awakening consciences across continents. Its message of unity and preservation inspired a new generation of environmental activists and changed how people viewed the delicate Arctic ecosystem. Nanook, now an older and wiser polar bear, continued his tireless vigil over the icy lands. His steps, though slower, still carried the same determination as always. Akna, with some silver feathers mixed into her once uniform golden plumage, still soared over the territory, her eyes as sharp as ever. One Arctic spring morning, as the sun began to appear after the long polar night, Nanook found Akna perched on a familiar ice formation. "Old friend," he called, approaching, "you seem thoughtful today." Akna turned to him, her eyes shining with a mix of nostalgia and hope. "I've been reflecting on our journey, Nanook. Look around us." Together they observed the landscape. Where there were once signs of destruction and exploitation, there was now a growing harmony between human presence and nature. Sustainable research stations dotted the horizon, working in partnership with local communities and respecting wildlife. "We've achieved more than we ever imagined," Akna said softly. Nanook nodded, a smile in his tired but still bright eyes. "Yes, but the work never ends. Each new generation must learn and commit anew." As if to emphasize his point, a group of young polar bears appeared on the horizon, led by the same cub Nanook had rescued years ago, now a strong and confident adult. Beside them, a flock of young eagles flew in formation, clearly learning the patrol routes. "See," Nanook said with pride, "the future we helped shape." At that moment, the sound of a gentle engine caught their attention. A small electric vehicle approached, and from it emerged a familiar figure, Eleanor, now with graying hair but the same fire in her eyes. "My old friends," she called, approaching carefully, "I have wonderful news to share." Eleanor explained that, thanks to the ongoing conservation efforts inspired by Nanook and Akna, a new international law had been passed, establishing the Arctic as a permanent protection zone. Harmful industrial activities were now banned, and new funds were allocated for research and preservation. "You didn't just save this place," Elena said, tears in her eyes. "You changed how the world sees nature and our relationship with it." As they spoke, more animals gathered around them: seals, walruses, Arctic foxes, and even some whales that approached the shore. It was as if the entire Arctic community had come together to celebrate. Nanook looked at Akna, then at the diverse group around them. "When we first met," he said, "we were two loners trying to survive. Now look at us. We're a family, all connected, all protecting each other." Akna spread her wings, as if wanting to embrace the entire scene. "And not just us. Humans, animals, the ice and sea themselves, we're all part of this great web of life." As the sun rose in the sky, bathing the landscape in golden light, Nanook and Akna found themselves at the center of a spontaneous celebration. Young animals played, adults exchanged knowing glances, and Elena coordinated with her team to document this historic moment. "What will we do now?" asked a young polar bear. The old guardian smiled, looking at his winged partner. "We'll keep watching, teaching, and loving this place, because as long as there are those who care, there will always be hope for the Arctic." Akna nodded, adding, "And remember, young ones, that our greatest strength comes from unity. No matter how different we may seem, we all have a role in protecting our home." As the day progressed, Nanook and Akna stepped away from the group, finding a moment of quiet. Side by side, as they had been so many times before, they gazed at the vast Arctic horizon. "You know, Akna," Nanook said softly, "when I think of all the hardships we faced, all the times we nearly lost hope, I wonder, what kept us going?" Akna tilted her head, reflecting for a moment before answering, "I think it was friendship, Nanook. Our friendship with each other, and the love we developed for this place, and all the creatures who call it home. Love gave us courage when we needed it, and hope when all seemed lost." Nanook nodded, a glimmer in his eyes. "And now, that love has spread. It's no longer just about the two of us." "No," Akna agreed. "It's about all of us, and it will continue long after we're gone." As the midnight sun began its dance on the horizon, painting the sky in pink and gold, Nanook and Akna remained there, living symbols of a friendship that had changed the world. Their legacy, a web of connections among all forms of life, would continue to inspire and protect the Arctic for generations to come. Decades passed since Nanook and Akna left this world, but their story remained alive, echoing through generations as a mythical tale of friendship, courage, and hope. On an Arctic summer afternoon where the sun shone uninterrupted, a young researcher named Anik walked across the tundra, her tablet in hand, collecting data on the region's climate changes. Descended from Inuit and raised on her people's legends, Anik had always felt a special connection to the story of the Arctic Guardians. As she crossed a hill covered in wildflowers, a sign of changing times, Anik spotted something that made her stop in her tracks. A young polar bear and a golden eagle side by side gazing at the horizon. Her heart raced. Could it be? Could they be descendants of Nanook and Akna? Carefully, she approached, silently activating her tablet's camera. The bear turned its head toward her, its eyes curious but not threatening. The eagle in turn slightly spread its wings, as if ready to protect its friend if necessary. "I can't believe it," Anik whispered, marveling at the scene. At that moment, as if responding to an invisible call, more animals began gathering around the unlikely duo. Arctic foxes, hares, muskoxen, and even a small family of wolves emerged from the landscape, forming a respectful circle around the bear and eagle. Anik, trained to observe and analyze, noticed something extraordinary. The animals weren't just coexisting peacefully, but seemed to be communicating. Exchanges of glances, subtle head movements, and soft vocalizations created a symphony of interaction that defied everything she had learned about animal behavior. With tears in her eyes, Anik understood she was witnessing the continuation of Nanook and Akna's legacy. The unity they had initiated decades ago hadn't just survived, it had evolved. The Arctic animals had developed a form of community, an interspecies alliance that helped them face the challenges of a changing world. Slowly, she activated the communicator on her wrist. "Base, this is Anik. You won't believe what I'm seeing," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. In the days that followed, Anik's discovery caused a sensation in the scientific community and beyond. Teams of researchers, conservationists, and filmmakers converged on the Arctic, eager to document and understand this unique phenomenon. The world watched in awe at the images of different species working together, sharing resources, and protecting one another. It was as if the spirit of Nanook and Akna had spread, creating a more resilient and adaptable web of life. This new evidence of animal cooperation not only revolutionized fields like biology and ecology, but also reignited global interest in Arctic preservation. Governments and organizations renewed their commitments to protect this unique ecosystem, inspired by the wisdom demonstrated by its inhabitants. Annika, now leading a long-term research project, often found herself on that same hill, watching the bear and eagle, whom she affectionately named Nanook and Akna Jr., and reflecting on the enduring power of an unlikely friendship. "You didn't just save the Arctic," she murmured to the horizon, imagining the spirits of Nanook and Akna hovering over the landscape. "You taught us a lesson the whole world needed to learn, that our differences can be our greatest strength when we unite for a greater good." And so, as the midnight sun bathed the tundra in an eternal glow, the story of Nanook and Akna continued to unfold, not just as a legend of the past, but as a living, evolving reality. Their legacy of friendship, courage, and unity had become the very essence of the Arctic, a lasting testament to the power of love and cooperation in the face of great challenges. Future generations would look back and see this moment as a turning point, when humanity finally understood that its own survival was intrinsically linked to the health and harmony of the entire natural world. And it all began with a polar bear, an eagle, and a friendship that defied all expectations. The story of Nanook and Akna, once a tale of two unlikely allies, had grown into a global movement, a beacon of hope for a world grappling with environmental crises and the urgent need for unity across species and cultures. Years turned into decades, and the Arctic, once a fragile frontier under threat, became a symbol of resilience and cooperation. The descendants of Nanook and Akna, both animal and human, carried forward their legacy, ensuring that the lessons of their friendship were never forgotten. The Arctic Council, inspired by the bond between bear and eagle, evolved into a global institution where humans, animals, and even artificial intelligence worked together to safeguard the planet. Anik, now an elder in her community, often recounted the story of Nanook and Akna to the younger generations. She would sit by the fire, her voice steady and warm as children gathered around her, their eyes wide with wonder. She spoke of the polar bear and the eagle, of their courage and their love for the Arctic, and of how their friendship had sparked a revolution in how humans viewed the natural world. "Nanook and Akna showed us that we are all connected," Anik would say, her gaze drifting to the horizon where the midnight sun painted the sky in hues of gold and pink. "They taught us that no matter how different we may seem, we share this earth, and it is our duty to protect it, not just for ourselves, but for all living beings." As the years passed, the Arctic became a sanctuary, a place where humans and animals coexisted in harmony. The once threatened ice cap stabilized, thanks to global efforts to combat climate change. The polar bears, eagles, seals, and countless other species thrived, their populations growing stronger with each passing year. The lessons of Nanook and Akna had taken root, spreading far beyond the Arctic to every corner of the globe. One day, as Anik walked across the tundra with her granddaughter Yura, they came across a young polar bear and a golden eagle perched together on an ice formation. The bear, strong and confident, turned its head to look at them, its eyes filled with a quiet wisdom. The eagle spread its wings, its golden feathers catching the sunlight, and let out a soft call that echoed across the vast expanse. "Grandmother," Yura whispered, her voice filled with awe. "Is that?" Anik smiled, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude. "Yes, my dear. That is the spirit of Nanook and Akna living on through their descendants. They remind us that their work is never done, and neither is ours." Together, Anik and Yura watched as the bear and eagle took off, the bear lumbering across the ice with steady determination, and the eagle soaring high above, its wings cutting through the crisp Arctic air. It was a sight that filled them with hope, a reminder that the legacy of Nanook and Akna would endure for generations to come. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the tundra in a soft golden light, Anik and Yura made their way back to their village. The air was filled with the sounds of life, the calls of birds, the rustling of the wind, and the distant roar of the ocean. It was a symphony of nature, a testament to the resilience and beauty of the Arctic. That night, as the aurora borealis danced across the sky, Anik and Yura sat together, sharing stories and dreams for the future. They spoke of the challenges that still lay ahead, of the work that needed to be done to ensure the Arctic remained a sanctuary for all who called it home. But they also spoke of hope, of the power of unity, and of the enduring legacy of Nanook and Akna. "Grandmother," Yura said, her voice soft but determined, "I want to be like you. I want to protect the Arctic, and carry on the story of Nanook and Akna. I want to make sure their legacy lives on. Anik reached out and took her granddaughter's hand, her eyes filled with love and pride. You already are, my dear. You already are. And so, under the watchful gaze of the aurora, the story of Nanook and Akna continued to unfold, a living testament to the power of friendship, courage, and unity. Their legacy, like the Arctic itself, was eternal, a beacon of hope for a world that had learned to cherish and protect the delicate balance of life. As the years turned into centuries, the Arctic remained a symbol of what humanity could achieve when it worked together, guided by the lessons of the past and the promise of the future. And at the heart of it all, the spirit of Nanook and Akna lived on, a reminder that even the most unlikely friendships could change the world.